They found his teeth before they found his name. The warehouse was quiet. Too quiet. Not the kind that whispers peace, but the kind that screams aftermath. Bullet holes stitched across the concrete walls. Blood pooled by the rusted office door, seeping into stacks of uncut cocaine. The air stank of cordite, sweat, and something far colder, betrayal. A Glock lay near the freezer, its magazine half spent. Footsteps echoed, slow and methodical, as if death itself was doing inventory. Outside, sirens screamed into the night. Inside, Rick Ross was gone. Not arrested. Not seen. Just gone. All that remained was a shattered phone, broken teeth, and a ledger that would burn a hole through Washington. Somewhere in the darkness, someone had made the call. The kind of call that sells empires for silence. And now, the empire that once made $1 million a day bled into the linoleum. Long before the empire, before the money or the myth, there was Rick, a quiet boy on the courts of South Central. He wasn't tall, but he moved like he floated. His mother worked 2 jobs. His father? Gone before Rick turned 5. The court was his sanctuary. A cracked rim on a concrete slab became his temple. Neighbors called him a ghost with a crossover. No drugs. No guns. Just hope carved into every bounce of that ball. He dreamed of the NBA, not fame, just escape. School couldn't hold him. Words felt like fences. But on the court he was free. Coaches noticed. Scouts whispered. But poverty's shadow moves faster than talent. When the school discovered Rick couldn't read, scholarships disappeared like smoke. And just like that, the only door that ever looked open slammed shut in his face. That's where the real story begins, not with crime, but with stolen potential. When basketball failed him, the streets didn't. They whispered promises. Not dreams, but shortcuts. Rick didn't jump in, he listened. He watched. South Central in the late 70s was a chessboard made of concrete and crack smoke. Dealers were kings. Cops were the pawns. And kids like Rick, they were the pieces no one counted until they flipped the whole board. His first lesson didn't come from a book, it came from a Benz. A man named Tony showed him how to count stacks faster than the alphabet. No violence, no flash. Just discipline. Rick studied the game like a scholar, taking notes in silence, watching every move. While others chased highs, he chased the blueprint. And when the time came, he didn't ask permission. He moved. Not to be feared. Not even to be rich. He just wanted control. Over money, over risk, over his life. The first bag was small. Crushed rocks in a film canister. $100 changed hands. No gun. No threat. Just a nod and a new reality. Rick didn't feel guilt. He felt power. Small, precise, but real. A boy who'd been invisible had become a name. The streets said his product was pure. Whispers turned into demand. That night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling of a friend's couch, a shoebox of cash under his arm. He didn't smile. He didn't sleep. He thought of his mother working the night shift, of coaches who never called again. He didn't know it yet, but this was the moment he stopped being Rick. The streets had christened him. From this crackling fuse, the empire would ignite. Rick never chose the name. The streets gave it to him, Freeway. He didn't smile when they said it. He just nodded. The name came from where he moved, how he moved. He owned no corners, no blocks. He flowed across the city like liquid ambition. He'd ride the 110 with bricks in the trunk and no fear in his eyes. The cops didn't see him. The rivals couldn't catch him. He didn't sell to users. He sold to sellers. Wholesale. Efficient. Ruthless in math, not blood. By the time they realized who he was, it was too late. The kid who couldn't read had built a network more efficient than the post office. And as his name echoed through la-like gospel, one truth settled over the city like smog. Freeway Rick Ross wasn't just selling crack. He was selling control. His name was Tony. Older. Wiser. Died one. Dangerous but quiet. He didn't flash gold or shout threats. He just moved, always with purpose. Rick watched him for weeks before Tony even spoke. When he did, it wasn't an offer. It was a test. Can you count fast without making noise? Tony said. Rick could. Faster than anyone. That day changed everything. Tony didn't teach Rick how to hustle. He taught him how to build. How to avoid cameras, how to speak in code, how to calculate risk like a banker. Stay quiet. Stay clean. Don't touch what you sell. Rick followed every word like scripture. He became the apprentice of a ghost. And under Tony's guidance, the small deals turned industrial. Rick wasn't in the game anymore. He was designing it. But in every lesson, Tony warned him, no one stays invisible forever. Rick nodded. But he didn't believe it. Not yet. No king builds an empire alone. Rick's crew wasn't flashy. They were loyal, silent, deadly efficient. There was Marcus, the numbers guy, who ran the books like Wall Street. There was Tiny, a giant with a soft voice who moved shipments like they were groceries. And Lisa, the lookout, sharp, brilliant, invisible in a crowd. Rick didn't run them. He respected them. They weren't employees. They were architects. Together, they carved out a distribution network that stretched from Watts to Compton, past the suburbs and into other states. Their product was clean. Their system was fast. Rick paid better than anyone. He punished less. That's how loyalty was born, not from fear, but from vision. They weren't just dealers. They were believers. And every Friday night, they'd meet in the back of a shuttered barbershop, raise their glasses, and toast without words. It started small. Then it spread like fire. Crack didn't just hit law. It consumed it. One hit turned into 10. 10 turned into neighborhoods. Cops couldn't stop it. Clinics couldn't keep up. Rick didn't invent crack, but he industrialized it. He broke it down, bagged it right, and sold it wholesale. By the time others were catching on, Rick's network was pumping millions of dollars worth of product into cities that had never heard his name. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud, but his work was everywhere. Mothers cried. Politicians raged. But the blocks kept burning, and Rick's accounts kept rising. Behind every overdose was another dealer who bought from Rick. Behind every dealer, another layer of insulation. Rick never touched the product after the first shipment. That was the brilliance and the curse. Rick had 3 rules. Never use. Never lie. Never break rhythm. His dealers followed these like gospel. No one high on their own supply. No one stepping out of line. No one bringing heat. Rick believed in order. If you couldn't read the books, you couldn't play the game. He made his team write weekly reports. Inventory, losses, gains. He'd sit for hours calculating risk like a Fortune 500 CEO. But even kings can't control every pawn. Temptation seeped in. Some dealers started using. Some skimmed. Rick didn't yell. He vanished them, quietly, without drama. The streets whispered of his calm. That was scarier than rage. He didn't need to shout. His money did the talking. His silence did the killing. The streets obeyed because they believed he was untouchable. And for a while, he was. The first knock came on a rainy Tuesday. Federal agents, plainclothes, knocking like landlords. Rick didn't run. He opened the door, calm. Smiled. "Can I help you?" They searched. Found nothing. But it was a message. The feds were watching. The streets buzzed with rumors. Somebody snitched. Rick played it cool, but inside he knew. The clock had started. His lawyer whispered warnings. "Your name's moving up the list." Rick didn't panic. He tightened the system. Cut off weak links. Doubled down on insulation. He didn't move less. He moved smarter. But that knock never left his ears. He replayed it every night, like a beat. Boom, boom, boom. Not fear, not guilt, just time ticking down. The empire was still his, but now every move left a shadow, and someone, somewhere, was following it. By 1984, Rick's name wasn't just legend, it was infrastructure. His reach stretched across California, into Texas, Ohio, Missouri. His network was tighter than corporate logistics. He used pagers before Wall Street did. Drop points changed hourly. Drivers were trained like pilots, routes, codes, no eye contact. Every shipment was timed to the second. Money moved in duffel bags, wrapped in rubber bands, reeking of gasoline to throw off dogs. His crew called him the architect. He kept no photos, no fingerprints, no trail. He owned no cars, no homes, only power. The profits? Staggering. At the peak, Rick moved $3 million worth of product a day. And yet, he wore no chains, no suits, just t-shirts and silence. To the world, he was invisible. But to the streets, he was gravity. With money came madness. The streets turned louder, bloodier. Dealers flashed gold like armor. Cars with spinning rims roared through alleys. But Rick hated flash. He warned his crew, "You draw attention, you draw death." Still, some didn't listen. One of his lieutenants bought a Rolls. Another threw a party with 3 DJs and 24 strippers. Feds noticed. The streets too. Jealousy is a disease that spreads faster than crack. Robberies rose. Friends turned cold. Rick watched from the sidelines, disgusted. They forgot the mission, he said. But the game had changed. Respect gave way to spectacle. And Rick, silent, brilliant, began to feel the walls shift. The noise wasn't just around him anymore. It was inside his empire. Then came the cracks. One shipment went missing. Another was light by 10 bricks. Rick didn't rage. He recalculated. But behind his calm, paranoia grew. Was it theft? Or surveillance? Lisa, his most trusted lookout, disappeared for 2 weeks. When she returned, she was thin, hollow-eyed, and silent. Rick asked no questions. Just moved her off-grid. Tiny, the enforcer, stopped returning pages. He was found in Vegas, broke, stoned, begging. The crew was unraveling, not from enemies, but from within. "Success is pressure," Tony once said. "Pressure makes diamonds, or corpses." Rick knew the difference now. The empire was too big, too fast, too loud. And for the first time, he questioned if he'd built it too well to control. To stay ahead, Rick made a move. He partnered with men he never thought he'd trust. Bigger players, cartel-connected, fluent in violence. These weren't street dealers. They wore suits. Smelled of cologne and blood. Meetings were tense, quiet affairs in Beverly Hills hotels under fake names. They brought better routes, cleaner product, and darker strings. Rick sat at the table, not as a guest, but as an equal. Yet he could feel it, the cold under their smiles. One of them, a man named Javier, always looked too long, asked too little. Rick didn't trust him. But he needed the leverage. And in this game, leverage cost blood. He'd stepped into deeper waters. The ocean didn't care how clean you swam. The deal looked routine. 10 keys, 1 buyer, downtown handoff. Lisa gave the green light. Tiny returned for backup. Everything lined up. But something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too clean. Rick didn't go himself. He never did. But he watched from a rooftop 3 blocks away. The deal went down. Then, sirens. Flashing lights exploded out of nowhere. Men tackled Tiny. Lisa vanished in the chaos. The buyer? A Fed. Oh. Undercover. Rick stood frozen, hands in his pockets, watching the scene like a funeral. No panic. Just calculation. Someone fed them this, he whispered. Not a street snitch. This was bigger. Someone with access. Someone close. The kind of betrayal that money couldn't buy, but power could. It was supposed to be just another drop. Warehouse. Midnight. One. Known buyer. Rick didn't like it. Too quiet, too clean. But the money was too good to say no. The crew waited inside while Rick circled in an unmarked van, scoping exits. Then came the flash, dozens of agents swarming in, shouting commands, guns drawn like fangs. Marcus dropped the cash and raised his hands. Lisa froze. And Tiny wasn't there. Rick didn't stop. He drove past the alley, eyes wide, heart still. It wasn't just a bust. It was a surgical strike. No mistakes. No survivors. He pulled over blocks away and called Tony, but the number was dead. That was the moment Rick knew. Someone had scripted this. Not the streets. Not a rival. This was higher. Organized. And someone had fed them everything. They came for him at dawn. No sirens. No yelling. Just a cold knock on a motel room door in Ohio. Rick opened it shirtless, unarmed, calm. Rick Ross? The agent asked. You know what this is? Rick nodded. No words. Just steel cuffs against bone. They flew him to Los Angeles in a blacked-out van, silent the entire way. No trial date. No discovery. Just a sealed file and whispers he wasn't supposed to hear. CIA involvement. Federal immunity. Too big for state court. Rick sat in the holding cell for days. No lawyer. No charges. Just cold meals and colder stares. He wasn't arrested. He was buried. And somewhere in that silence, Rick stopped believing this was about drugs. This was about something deeper. Something darker. Prison stripped everything. His name, his time, his breath. Concrete walls. Cold steel bunks. A toilet in the corner, no lid. The air reeked of sweat and defeat. Rick kept his head down, eyes scanning. No tears. No fights. Just observation. His first week, he saw a man stabbed over toothpaste. The next, he saw a god smuggle heroin. Rules didn't exist, only leverage. And Rick? He had none. His crew was scattered. His money was frozen. His lawyers were ghosts. But he still had his mind. And with that, he studied. Law books, doctorate, case files, codes, YZ. He read like a man clawing toward oxygen. Each page was a weapon. If the streets were gone, he'd make the courtroom his battleground. The file arrived late. Sealed, stamped, buried. Rick opened it like peeling back flesh. Inside, transcripts. Wiretaps. Surveillance logs. One name echoed. Lisa. His lookout. His sister in arms. She'd been flipped a year ago, caught with a half kilo given a choice. Prison or betrayal. She chose freedom. Her intel fed the feds every move Rick made. The missing bricks. The busted deal. All of it traced back to her. Rick didn't cry. Didn't scream. He just closed the file and stared at the wall until the light shifted. That betrayal didn't break him, it clarified him. The empire was over. But war was beginning. The court documents painted a story, but not the whole one. Rick read deeper. One name surfaced again and again. Danilo Blandon. A Nicaraguan supplier. Untouchable. Protected. And Blandon had walked free. Testified. Smiled on the stand. His supply? Traced back to federal-backed operations in Central America. Contra funding. Shadow ops. Guns for drugs. Rick sat in his cell, hands trembling, not with fear, but rage. He hadn't just been a dealer. He'd been a pawn in something global. They used him, fed the streets through him, burned him when the papers got too loud. He didn't just want out now. He wanted to blow the whole story wide open. Rick Ross was never just a kingpin. He was evidence. The next time Rick saw Lisa, it was behind the glass. No yelling. No accusations. Just a long silence, heavy as steel. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Rick leaned in, voice like gravel. "Was it worth it?" he asked. Her lips trembled, but no answer came. He saw the shame, the weight. But shame couldn't fix betrayal. "You killed something," he whispered. "Not me. Us." Then he stood and walked away. No threats. No forgiveness. That silence would echo longer than any bullet. Back in his cell, Rick didn't sleep. He scribbled notes, drew connections, tracked timelines. He wasn't seeking revenge. He was preparing a war. Legal, strategic, devastating. He'd lost his empire, but now he was building a weapon made of truth. He buried himself in legal codes. Habeas corpus. Sentencing structures. Brady violations. The language of the law became his new product. Each loophole was a shipment. Each statute, a brick. He filed motion after motion. Everyone denied. But Rick learned. He learned how to structure an appeal, how to expose the cracks in the system. Guards mocked him. "You ain't no lawyer." But Rick didn't flinch. "I don't need to be," he muttered. "I just need to know more than the one across the table." His notes grew into arguments. His arguments into strategy. Years passed and Rick was no longer just an inmate. He was a legal storm gathering inside the belly of the beast. One night, a clerk slipped him a sealed envelope. No name. No note. Just a copy of a suppressed court transcript. It was bland on record admitting federal protection, protected trafficking, authorized distribution. Rick read it twice. Then again. His hands shook. This wasn't just a technicality. It was the keystone. Proof that the government had used him, then destroyed him. Rick knew what this meant. Not just freedom, but exposure. If he moved wrong, they'd bury him deeper. But if he moved right, he could break the whole machine. He whispered to himself, "This isn't about getting out. This is about burning it down." Rick typed his appeal on a battered prison typewriter. Each key press a bullet in slow motion. The argument wasn't emotional. It was surgical. Evidence, timelines, testimony, all mapped like blueprints. He knew they'd resist. Knew they'd stall. But once filed, the paper trail would live. Judges, date. Reporters. Activists. He mailed 3 copies, certified, and watched the envelope disappear into the outgoing bin. That moment, for the first time in years, he smiled. Not wide. Not soft. But like a man seeing dawn through barbed wire. They called him a drug lord. Now he was writing his own freedom. 1 page at a time. The motion spread like fire. One journalist picked it up. Then another. The headlines turned from drug kingpin to government asset. Outside, activists rallied. Inside, guards grew colder. Some called him dangerous. Others called him brilliant. Rick stayed quiet, working, watching. He felt the machine stir. Phone calls resumed. Old lawyers reappeared. Even Tony sent a letter, short, unsigned, but clear. "They're scared." Rick knew. The storm was coming. Not of bullets, but of truth. He didn't have a throne anymore, but he had something sharper. Unstoppable. The empire had fallen, but the reckoning had just begun. The door clanged open like a gunshot. After decades inside concrete and steel, Rick stepped into sunlight. No cuffs. No guards. Just sky. Open and quiet. His shoes felt too soft. His body too light. He didn't run. He walked. Steady. Purposeful. The air tasted strange, thick with memory and regret. Outside, no crowd waited. Just one man, his old lawyer, nodding from a dented car. Rick looked back once, not with fear, but finality. That place took his time, but not his mind. He didn't cry. Couldn't. Something inside him had calcified. What he'd lost couldn't be replaced. What he'd learned they couldn't take. And now, on the other side of the gate, Rick Ross was no longer a kingpin or an inmate. He was something far more dangerous. A man who knew too much. Los Angeles didn't wait for him. It evolved, mutated, calcified. Strip malls where trap houses once stood. Luxury condos now loomed over lots where deals were once made in whispers. Rick walked through neighborhoods like a ghost haunting his own legend. The faces were younger, harder. The slang had changed, but the pain hadn't. Kids still ran the streets. Mothers still cried behind closed curtains. And the drugs? Smarter. Meaner. Synthetic. The war never ended. It just changed uniforms. Rick stopped at a mural, his face painted next to burning roses. A tribute or a warning? He didn't know. He touched the paint with trembling fingers. "I was never supposed to be this," he whispered. But history doesn't ask permission. It writes itself in blood and silence. He found Marcus behind bulletproof glass, now managing a check-cashing spot in Crenshaw. Tiny. Gone. Rumor said overdose in Vegas. Tony never resurfaced. And Lisa, no one spoke her name. The past wasn't a chapter. It was a graveyard. Rick stood at Tiny's unmarked stone, staring at dry flowers, wind whispering like regret. These weren't crew members anymore. They were ghosts etched in his memory. Each one a lesson. Each one a scar. Rick didn't talk much. He didn't preach. But when people asked, what happened to the empire, he just stared. Empires fall. Some with war. Others with whispers. His didn't collapse. It eroded. Slow, quiet, fatal. He started small. Talks at halfway homes, churches, shelters. "I sold poison," he'd say. "Now I'm trying to clean the stain." He never asked for applause. Didn't want it. Some welcomed him. Others spat at his name. He accepted both. He wasn't rewriting his past. He was owning it. In one room a boy asked, "Do you miss it?" Rick paused. "No," he said. "I miss what I thought it would give me." A few clapped. Most didn't. That was okay. Redemption wasn't about noise. It was about silence, how you filled it, how you lived with it. Rick wasn't fixing the world, just trying not to break anything else. At night he sat alone. No guards, no screams. Just a single bulb over a kitchen table stacked with letters. Some from old enemies, some from kids who'd read about him in books. Rick read them all. Some he replied to. Others he just held, letting the weight of each word settle on his chest. The empire was long gone. The money, a ghost. But the consequences, eternal. He didn't chase peace anymore. He simply carried his past like a shadow. He'd never be free. Not really. But in that stillness, with the night pressing in, Rick Ross did what most kings never do. He survived the fall. They still whisper his name. In barber shops. Chevy out. On corners. In rap lyrics and podcasts. Freeway Rick. But the kids who chanted weren't there. They didn't see the bodies. Didn't watch the neighborhoods rot. To them, he's a myth. A legend carved from dollar bills and gun smoke. Rick walks past a group of teens, rapping under a freeway pass. One of them throws up a hand and shouts, "Og Ross." He nods back, but keeps walking. He doesn't stop them. Doesn't correct them. Because legends don't explain themselves. They haunt. They echo. And the same streets he once fed now feed off his name. Fame isn't freedom. Legacy isn't healing. And sometimes survival is the cruelest reward of all. Rick stands before a classroom now. Community college students, curious, skeptical, listening. You think this game ends in money? It ends in coffins and concrete? Some smirk. Some take notes. One asks, "Would you do it again?" Rick pauses. "I never did it for greed," he says. "I did it because nobody offered anything else." The room quiets. Truth doesn't need a microphone. Rick walks them through the system, how it's designed, who it serves, what it consumes. He's not teaching crime. He's teaching clarity. They don't clap when he finishes, but they don't look away either. And in that silence, Rick sees something he never had when he was their age: options. Rick flips through an old photo album in a dusty box, faces long gone. Marcus, Tiny, new one, even Lisa, smiles frozen in better times. He lingers on a Polaroid, 5 of them around a table, plastic cups raised, young and untouchable. He runs a finger across the surface. "We thought it would last forever," he mutters. "But empires built on smoke can't cast shadows. They vanish in wind." He slides the photo back into the envelope, seals it and writes, "Do not open." He isn't burying the past. He's acknowledging it. Some memories aren't for sharing. They're for carrying. Quietly. Until the end. The camera rolls. The producer leans in, asks the final question. "Do you think justice was ever served?" Rick stares for a long time. "Justice," he says, "ain't a verdict. It's a currency, and I was broke." The room goes still. The mic hums. "But I learned," he adds. "Learned how systems eat their own. Learned that the game I played was never mine to win." The producer swallows hard. Rick leans back, looks into the lens, not angry, not broken, just done. "They used me. I used them. Nobody wins. We just survive long enough to count the damage." The red light on the camera goes dark. The silence that follows says more than any headline ever did. Rick walks into a funeral home. No one notices. No one recognizes. He's not there to mourn. He's there to remember. The man in the casket was once a runner. No headlines. No eulogies. Just another lost name in a lost war. Rick places a single folded note on the body's chest. "I'm still here," it reads. "But the ghosts outnumber me now." He turns, adjusts his collar, and leaves. Outside, life keeps moving. Cars. Noise. Sirens in the distance. Rick blends into it all, just another shadow in a city built on forgetting. Because legends don't retire. They vanish. And sometimes, the loudest revenge is silence.